My sketchbook is a witness of what I am experiencing, scribbling things whenever they happen. Vincent van Gogh.
Hey everyone, it's me, Alicia Marie. Join me today as I show you how to make 4 different types of sketchbooks. Each sketchbook was chosen for its accessibility in tools, time, supplies, and ability. The first sketchbook I'm going to show you how to make today is a simple 1-page sketchbook. This sketchbook is the easiest sketchbook we're going to be making, and it's just a couple folding and ripping techniques to make this awesome little notebook guy.
You're going to need a piece of paper, a small dish of water and a Q-tip, and a bone folder or marker. Start by folding your paper lengthwise in half, making sure to line up your corners and edges. Take your time. Once you've folded the edge, take your bone folder and run it along the edge of the paper just to crispen that fold. Then you're going to flip the paper over and fold it again the other way, using your bone folder to crispen the edge. Then you're going to take your piece of paper and fold it in half the other way, again, making sure that you're lining up those corners and edges. Use your bone folder to crispen the seam. Flipping your piece of paper over and running your bone folder along the edge the other way. Open up your paper. Now take each end and fold it towards the center line. This divides your paper into quarters, making sure, again, to use your bone folder to crispen the line on both sides of the page. Now you're going to fold in the other side to the center, making sure to keep everything lined up. Take your time and use the bone folder to make the line nice and crisp. Next, you're going to take the 2 center sections of your paper and you're going to really press those seams with your bone folder, making sure to press it on both sides, flipping your paper over. Then take a Q-tip and run a little bit of water along that middle seam. So just the 2 rectangles in the center there. Flipping it over, running a little bit of water along the other side. I like to use a Q-tip because you don't want to get it too wet. Then it should be really easy to just pop the seam open and split it in the middle. Now I'm showing you how to open and fold your book. So it's popping those 2 edges and then folding it into a little booklet. I like to take my bone folder just to accentuate those edges again to make sure that it lays flat. These little notebooks are so versatile and easy to use. I love bringing them into museums or galleries as a way to take notes. The great thing about these notebooks is once they're full, you're able to actually flip them around and make a new book. So my book is full of little doodles and some notes. As you can see, I have a whole side that has nothing on it. So all you have to do is open your book out, lay it flat, and then pop it out the other way, just using those rip seams as a place to pop. And then you fold it over and see, it's like you have a whole new book.
The second sketchbook I'm going to show you how to make is a simple folded stapled sketchbook.
You're going to need 4 to 8 sheets of paper, a stapler, and a bone folder or marker. Starting by folding each piece of paper in half, making sure to line up your corners and edges, taking your time. Then you're going to take your bone folder to crease the edge. Bone folders have been around for a very long time and are essential to bookbinding. Although traditionally they are made out of bone, you can now get plastic or wooden ones. For our purposes today, if you don't have a bone folder, I find a marker, a wooden dowel or brush effectively does the same thing, which is creasing those lines and making crisp folds. Once you finish your last fold, you're going to stack your pages into signatures. Signatures are what we call these little bundles of folded paper. You want to open up each piece of paper and stack it inside of each other along those center folds. I like to give it a good little tap to make sure that all the edges are lined up. Then taking my stapler, I staple along the edges. If you're like me and only have a mini stapler, you can just staple along the folded edge. But if you have a long arm stapler, I recommend opening up the book and stapling in the seam. If you have a long-arm stapler, it's going to be much stronger, but I'm going to show you how to finesse the book if you only have a short stapler. So here you'll see me just finessing the piece of paper, creating a fold before the staple. And I'm going to do that to each and every page so that it can easily be opened up without any of the staples popping out. This is a super simple book.
The third type of sketchbook I'm going to show you how to make is a simple single signature sketchbook with really simple stitch binding. This is a great fast sketchbook if you want to have a few more pages than what the stapler can handle.
For this book, you're going to need 6 to 8 sheets of paper, a needle and thread, a pair of scissors, an awl or a nail, a bone folder or a marker, and a cutting mat. You're going to start by taking each sheet of paper and folding it in half, making sure that you're lining up each edge and corner and keeping it straight, and pressing your edges with your bone folder to make crisp folds. I personally find these sketchbooks very handy, and I make them for a lot of different reasons. I think that they look much more professional than a stapled book, and this is an excellent technique for making your own zines, which are self-published magazines. I also like to use these types of books as a way to keep track of projects, and I make a lot of them while I'm at work working on different things. I've always been a very paper and pencil type of gal, so I have different notebooks and sketchbooks for so many different purposes and projects. Once you've finished folding all of your sheets of paper, you're going to stack them in a signature. Now, depending on how thick the paper is you're using, you might even be able to get away with having up to 12 sheets of paper in this sketchbook. You're going to open up each page and lay it so the center seam is lined up, just like we did with the stapled sketchbook, only we're using more paper. Once you have the signatures all together and lined up, you're going to tap the paper to make it nice and even. And I like to take my bone folder just to really press that edge and make sure that they're all laying together in the signature. Then you're going to take a bit of thread. I prefer to use embroidery thread or wax thread, something thicker. What you use in a sewing machine, I think, is just too thin and gets too knotted and isn't quite strong enough. Also, I like the color that the embroidery thread brings. So you're going to tie it in a knot and cut the excess. Next, you're going to mark where we're going to make holes. So I like to mark my first holes 1 inch in from each edge of the paper. Then you're going to make 2 more marks on each edge to make a total of 6 marks. So I'm setting them 1 inch apart on each end. So there's 3 on each end of the book. Once everything's marked, you're going to open up your book, making sure that all the pages stay together, and taking your awl or a nail, you're going to pre-punch each hole. So I'm just going from one hole to the next, making sure that I'm going through all my sheets of paper and that everything's staying lined up together. You don't want the paper to be sliding around because then the holes won't be where you need them to be. Starting from the inside of the book, you're going to start at one end and pull your string through. For this first one, I like to leave a little bit of a tail. Then you're going to go through the outside, through the hole next to it, making sure that you come out in the middle, going through all your sheets of paper. I then go through the loop of the tail that I left behind. This helps make the book look symmetrical on the inside and also adds a bit of strength. Then I carefully pull the string tight, starting from the outside and then doing the inside. You don't want to just pull because you'll rip your sheet of paper. Then I'm going to hop out through the third hole on that end. And then I'm going to go back in on the other side of the most center hole, making sure that my string's going all the way through each time. Then I'm going to go through the middle hole back to the outside, pulling my string as I go. I'm then going to go through the final hole at the other end of the book, pulling my string all the way through nice and slowly, taking my time. Then I'm going to do a little knot, so looping through the string that's on the inside and creating a little loop. I'm going to do a double knot, so here you can see it again. I loop through, the stitch and then I loop through my loop. Then you just cut the excess string. And that is your finished book.
The fourth sketchbook I'm going to show you how to make is a Coptic sketchbook. Now this sketchbook's really great because you can put way more pages in it. It's going to last you a lot longer. And my favorite part is no matter what page you open to, it always lies flat, which makes it perfect for drawing in.
For this sketchbook, you're going to need a lot of paper, cover from an old sketchbook or some bookboard, decorative paper, a glue stick, awl or nail, pencil, a bone folder, an X-Acto, scissors, needle and thread, ruler, and a cutting mat. You're going to start by taking your X-Acto, your ruler, and your cutting mat and cutting the perforated edges off of your bookboard. You're then going to cut your pieces of bookboard in half to make 2 covers. Take your time and go nice and slow. Using an X-Acto might be a little tricky, so ask for help if you need it. Now, I've made a bonus video on how to decorate your covers, but essentially I just covered it with the decorative paper using the glue stick. Now, we're going to start by taking our stack of paper, and this is sketchbook paper from the sketchbook that I dissected to get the book board, so it'll fit perfectly if you use this hack. You're going to be folding each sheet of paper individually, making sure that your corners and edges line up, and use your bone folder or your marker to make your edges nice and crisp. Take your time. Listen to some music. This is going to take a little while, especially if you want a big sketchbook. Great job. So once you have all of your pieces of paper folded in half, you're going to start by stacking them into signatures. Now, we've made a lot of single signature sketchbooks, but Coptic sketchbooks and other large sketchbooks are made using multiple signatures. So I like using 4 pages per signature. So I just open up and slide in 4 pieces of paper, making sure that the center edge all lines up. You're going to then take your bone folder and just press the edge, making sure that all the pieces of paper are laying together neatly. You're then going to go through all of your folded pieces of paper and stack them into signatures, 4 sheets of paper per signature, and then you're going to line them up and stack them with the seam sides all facing in the same direction. Take your time with this step and make sure that you press down each edge using your bone folder or your marker. That way the book can be bound tightly and flat. The next step will be marking where we're going to add our stitches. So using a ruler and a pencil and taking the signature that's on top of the pile, I'm going to make 6 marks, same as we did with our last sketchbook. So 1 inch in on each side and then 1 inch apart, grouping on 3 on one end and 3 on the other for a total of 6 marks. Now carefully, I am making sure that my signatures are stacked, making sure that everything's lined up, because what we need to do is take a piece of our bookboard, because it's a nice right angle, line it up with the bottom of our table on our cutting mat and making a 90-degree edge. Then you're going to draw down that edge on the line to mark the dots for each stitch on each signature so that they're straight and lined up when we go to bind the book together. Now, I would recommend asking someone to help you with this step. It might be easier if they're holding the stack of signatures so that they don't shift around, because it's really essential that these lines stay nice and straight, as if they're not straight, your binding won't be straight and your book will twist. Once all of your signatures are marked, you're going to start with the top signature, making sure that your center is lined up and the pages are straight, and you're going to punch holes on all of those marks. I like to use my awl, but a nail works as well. Anything that you can get a bit of leverage on to press those holes will work. Again, making sure that your pages are lined up before you do this, because you don't want the holes going in the wrong spots. Now, it's really important while you're punching the holes in your signatures that you restack your signatures in the same order. This will help with any possible shifting that might have happened when you are marking the holes, and will keep your sketchbook way straighter. So I like to just take it off of one pile and put it on the other, making sure that it's all going in the same order. Once you've punched holes in all of your signatures, we're now going to do the top and bottom cover. So I like to take the top cover and put it on the top, and take the bottom signature and the bottom cover and start by lining up the opening edge. So you want all of the edges to be contained within the cover of the book, because the cover is there to protect your pages. Once everything's lined up and straight, I'm going to take my awl and mark dots right beside the holes. This is going to show me where I need to punch holes out in order to sew the book covers into the signatures. This next step might be a little tricky, so ask for help if you need it, but you're going to take your awl and you're going to push the holes all the way through the book board. So I use a nice little twisting motion, and then my awl will come out and I press it as far as I can, because awls are tapered. So I go all the way to the thick part and I go in from both sides, then just pressing the cardboard back down using the butt of the awl. That little wooden stick is what I use to make those holes nice and clean. And now I'm just going to go along and punch holes for all 6 marks for the back cover. So once you're done punching holes for your bottom cover, you're going to slip it on the bottom of your signature stacks, remembering that we're trying to keep everything in the same order. Now you're going to take your top signature and your top cover, and we're going to do the same thing on this one. So lining up our edges, making everything straight, doing little pilot holes with our awl right beside the marks that we've already done on the signatures. Taking your time. Then you're going to put the signature back where it belongs. And same as before, we're going to push the holes for the cover all the way through, using the end to tamp that book board back in and make everything look super clean. Now, if you don't have an awl, a nail should work, but you might need a little bit of assistance. Just go nice and slow and make sure that everything's going through. A nail should work, but an awl is definitely made for the task. Now you're going to start by taking some of your string, threading your needle, tying a knot, cutting the excess, same as we did before, and we start on the bottom cover this time. So I push my signatures in front of me, I flip down my bottom cover, and I flip the bottom signature down. Remember, we're trying to keep the signatures in the same order. Now, opening your back signature, you're going to take your needle and you're going to push it through one of the holes on the edge of your book. You're going to pull it all the way through, getting rid of that tail. Then you're going to loop it around the cover. So I'm going from the back of the cover and looping that string around. Now it's important that you take your time on these stitches because you really want this book to be tightly bound. So then I'm looping my needle around that string to make a knot, and I'm going back through that hole. So now we're in the middle of our back signature. We're going to pull the string. We're going to make sure everything's lined up and tight and that it's not wiggling or shifting too much. And we're going to go back out through the hole next to it. Now, I make sure that my string is tight. You don't want to have to go back if you notice it's loose. And you're going to pull your string around that book again. Then you're going to loop it around the part that's connecting the signature to the back cover to make a little knot. Then pushing the needle back into the signature through that second hole, pulling it tight, and then going through that third hole. It's going to be the same thing again. So we're going to make sure it's tight and not wiggling. Go through that back cover, coming up, pulling it tight, looping around that string to make a little knot. And then you're going to go back in through that third hole into the center of your signature. Now you're going to skip over to the other side, go through that center hole, pulling your string tight, and it's the same thing all over again. So you're going in through the back of the cover, pulling your string tight, looping around to make a knot, pulling it tight again, and going through that same hole. Opening up our book, grabbing the string, pulling it tight, and going through the next hole. Once you get the hang of it, it's a lot of repetitive stitching. So getting that back cover on, again, we're going in through the back cover, making a knot around the string that's connecting it, and going back into the hole. Now things are going to change up a bit on this last hole. We're going to go through, same as we did before, pulling it tight. Then you're going to take your needle, go in through the back cover, pulling it tight again, looping around that string to make a little knot. And then instead of going back into that same signature, you're going to grab the next signature off the pile, make sure it's lined up, and go in through that first hole on your second signature. Pulling it through. And every time we add a new piece of paper, there's a chance of it getting a little wobbly. So just make sure that you're holding it tightly where you need it to be. You're going to go through that second hole, and then we're going to loop through where the string connects the covers together, make a little knot, and in through the second hole of our second signature. Now from here, it's repetitive motion again to work our way across the book. So back through our signature, pulling it tight, making sure everything's lined up. You can see me just adjusting my strings there. You really just want to take your time and not pull too hard because you'll just rip your paper. So just take your time making the strings come through properly, making sure it's not catching, making sure it's not loose, and making your book shift. So we're just going to continue just stitching, working our way across the signature, going out through the signature, looping around the string, pulling it tight and making a knot, and then passing the needle back through that same hole in the signature, pulling the string tight, and back through the next hole. Bookbinding is really repetitive and meditative, so once you get the hang of it, it actually goes quite quickly. Now we're getting the next signature off the pile, adding it to our book, making sure everything's lined up, and going through that first hole again. Pulling it tight, taking your time, making sure everything's adjusted and straight and not shifting. And once you've got it all set up, you can go through the next hole. It might be helpful to have a second pair of hands helping you make sure everything's straight here, but just take your time. You can use bulldog clips too. I'm pushing my needle around that string, connecting the signatures to make a knot, and then back in through that signature. So we're going to do one more looping around with this string, and then we're going to tie it off because it's getting a little short. When you're getting string ready for bookbinding, you have a few options. I like to make it long enough so that it's manageable, but it doesn't get in too many knots. If you're finding that your string's knotting a lot, just slow down and breathe. But if it's quite an issue, you can buy special thread. It's called bookbinding thread, and it's waxed and it doesn't knot as much. Here I'm knotting the string, so I looped around my stitch and looped through the hole, pulling tight to make a knot. I like to do a double knot, so we'll see it one more time. So we're going through that stitch and then through the loop that made, pulling it tight and cutting the excess string. Awesome. So now I'm going to take my freshly threaded needle and push it through the next hole in my signature, and I'm pulling it tight. Just take your time, especially when it's a little longer. Now I'm looping around that next connecting string, and I'm pulling it tight to make a knot. Just take your time. If your thread's starting to knot at all, you want to go nice and slow with these steps. So now I'm going back in through the signature, pulling my string all the way through, making sure it's tight and that nothing's shifting, and then back through the next hole. So when I'm bookbinding, the more signatures I add, I find when you go to do the looping step, it's essential that we actually open up our book to the previous signature to loop around. So I'm adding a new signature. As you see, I'm opening up my book, looping it around, and then going back through the signature. It just gets easier because you want these stitches to be tight. So this is the best way to make your stitches tight, but still be able to loop around. So we're going to continue working our way across each signature. And when we get to the final hole of that signature, we're going to add our next signature to our book and continue to stitch across that one. You are going to continue to stitch each signature to your book, going across the signature, making sure that you're going out, looping around the previous one to make a knot, and back through your hole. You're going to continue to do this for all of your signatures until you are down to your last signature and your front cover. A wild Doomstar appears. Amy is so helpful at helping me find books. Wow. Thanks for your help, bud. So as we're coming to the end of our book, it's important that you make sure that you have enough string to complete the book. So I just tied off a new amount of string since I'm almost at the end. This is the final signature before I'm down to my last signature and cover. So same steps as before, looping around that last one. Then we're going to take both the signature and the cover at the same time, making sure that everything's lined up and the pages are protected by the cover. You're going to take your string. After you've looped it around, you're going to go through your cover, starting from the top, pulling your string through, making sure it's nice and tight, lining up your last signature, looping around the string to make a knot, and through the signature. Take your time on this last one. It is tricky. You want to make sure that these strings are tight and holding your book together, because if not, your covers will just kind of flop around and your book will wiggle and shift. So really take your time making it tight, making sure that you're not pulling too tight so as that you will rip the paper. I'm just tightening it up a little bit here. I just wanted to show you guys how much fussing it kind of takes to get these final covers on. And then we're going to go in through the second hole of our final signature, making sure everything's lined up and tight. Really make sure that everything is where you want it to be, because as you go, it'll be harder. That includes your cats. Push them away. Push them so far away. Then in through the front cover, taking my needle, going in through the front, pulling it out, making sure that it's tight, that the cover and the final signature are lined up where you want it. I'm straightening it, as you can see, then I'm looping around that last signature, pulling my needle through on the other side, pulling it tight to make a little knot, make sure it's lined up, and then go through the same hole of your signature that you came out of. Same as what we've been doing this whole time. Pulling your string tight and going through your next hole. Pulling your string tight again, take your time, go in through your front cover, pull the needle out, pull your string all the way through, make sure it's tight and lined up. Then we're gonna loop it around our last signature. So I'm opening my book, looping around that string, and pulling it tight to make a little knot. And then back through the signature again. Pull it tight, and you guessed it, go through your next hole. Pulling your string all the way through, making sure that there's no gaps or snags, that it's nice and tight. Going in through your front cover again, front to back, pulling your string, making sure it's tight, making sure everything's straight. Looping around your last stitch. See, opening up your book, looping it around your string, pulling it tight, pulling your string all the way through to make a knot, and going back into the signature. Awesome. So you guessed it, we're just going to do this again. Making sure it's straight, making sure it's tight, taking our time, going through the next hole in our signature. Wild Doomstar. He's back. Look at his floofy tail. Isn't he the sweetest little dude? Anyways, back to bookbinding. So in through the front cover, You know this. We've done this. We've done it already. Pulling it tight, lining it up. It gets easier as you get to the end. Looping around that string. Find your needle. There it is. Looping around that back string. Making a little knot, making sure everything's tight and secure and straight. Everything we've been doing this whole time. Back through the signature. Great job. So this is going to be our last time. We're going out through the signature, pulling our string tight, going through the cover, front to back. Pulling our string tight again. We're going to loop around the stitch on our last signature, pulling it tight, really making sure everything's connected, and going back in through our final signature, the final hole. We're going to pull the string tight, and we're going to make a double knot. So looping around our last stitch, pulling the string through the loop that made, and pulling the string tight. And we're going to do it again. So looping through the stitch, looping through the loop, loop to loop, pull it tight, awesome. Take your scissors, give it a little snip, and voila, you have a beautiful Coptic sketchbook and a really floofy Doomstar tail. Doomstar tail not included.
Thanks so much for watching our instructional video on how to make a sketchbook in 4 different ways. If you're curious about how to decorate the cover for your own Coptic sketchbook, make sure you check out our bonus video linked somewhere in the description. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you guys soon. Mwah!